man. Let me know if y'all can see the PowerPoint. The PowerPoint. Okay. Well, we good then. I'm gonna go in just a second and let a few more people get in here. But how you doing, San Tony? I'm finna share the video. Well, I guess I done shared it. Okay. I wanted to. Let's see. Give me a second, y'all. I'm sharing the video. We're inviting people to the video. Y'all give me just a minute. I'm still trying to share the video to a few people. We'll get started. Okay. All right. All is good. I'm good, San Antonio. I'm good. Hotep Ashwin. Am I saying your name right, Sam? Well, I guess I'll go ahead and get started. First, I'd like to say ETM Hotel, Uncle Giles and Neb, Dua Netcha, Dua Aku. Basically, Rennie Kofi Paisa. Basically, I said, welcome in peace. Peace to the divine. Peace to the ancestors. A Hekanu Aku, which praise the ancestors. Because I always want to give honor to the ancestors before I do anything. We wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the ancestors. I always have to say that. So I always have to honor the ancestors. Okay, today my lecture, PowerPoint lecture is on the Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey. A lot of us don't, well, I'm not going to say a lot. Here where I'm from, a lot of people don't know about the Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey. They don't teach about him in the school system. We know about Martin Luther King. We know about Malcolm X, Some of us know about the Nation of Islam and the Elijah Muhammad. Some of us know about some of the other civil rights activist movements, but we don't hear too much about the Honorable Marcus Messiah Garvey and the UNIA and the ACL. So today I'm gonna do a presentation on it. I know some information, if we get some information on it, it's not lengthy information, because I know back in the days with me doing research on the UNIA and Marcus Garvey, there's only a limit of information. So I'm gonna kind of go a little bit deep into Marcus Garvey and the UNI movement today. The PowerPoint is gonna be a little lengthy, but you know, kind of bear with me, family. Like I said, I know a lot of us attention spans is not that long, but just try to bear with me, and it's gonna be some good information. Okay, this is my disclaimer, and I always have to give a disclaimer. I am not a teacher, but merely a student sharing information, and that information provided is for the educational purpose only. And if you are in doubt, do the research or have it verified by someone qualified. I reserve the right to change the focus of this presentation, to shut down, sell, or change the terms of the use at my own discretion. All trademarks, design rights, copyrights, registered names, mottos, logos, avatars, or Sigma marks uses are cited by this website or the properties of their respective owner. I reserve the right to add information as it come available and or adapt changes, improve information as it come available in the future. Inputs, wanted changes, additions, and deletions encouraged. ETM Hotel, Senat, Monica Lamb. Peace, Joshua. Hello, Tasha and Valerie. What's up, cuz? What's up, Alex? Okay. Now, this here is a hotel, we call a Hotep Dina suit. It is a offering formula to the ancestors. So again, I always talk about the ancestors. You will always hear me say Hekanu, Aku, or you'll hear me say Dua, Duau, Aku, or you'll hear me say Igun, Mujube, Iba-I, or Igungun, Kiki, Igungun. So I'm always honoring and giving reference and praise to the ancestors. So I'm going to do a Hotep Dina suit, and I was just going to put Marcus Garvey's name in the Hotep Dina suit, but I'm going to just put the word ancestors instead of Marcus Garvey, because I not only want to reference Marcus Garvey, which is an ancestor now, but those that also participated in the UNIA and the ACL that are gone, that participated in this great movement. So I want to honor them as well. So the top is the sesh, the translation, and the transliteration and the translation. So we have here Hotep Dina Sut Wusir Neb Nebju Necher Ah Neb Adu DF Paret Haru Ek Hinket Ka Epet Sesh Minket Het Nebet Neferet Wabet Anket Necher M Inka In Imaku Aku Maku Haru. So basically I said, and offering the king Osir, Lord of Jadu, great God, Lord of Abydos, so that they may give verbal offering in bread, in beer, bread, ox fowl, alabaster, linen, everything good and pure in which a God lives, for the Ka of the reverence one, the ancestors justified. Okay. Marcus Mosiah Garvey wanted to return African Americans back to Africa to create an African economic independence. His movement will go on to inspire Martin Luther King, Elijah Muhammad, and his Nation of Islam, Malcolm X, the Rastafarians, and also Nelson Mandela. Again, we don't hear a lot about Marcus Garvey in our community, and they don't teach Marcus Garvey in our school system. I don't know about anywhere else, but dealing with Mississippi, most people in Mississippi don't know nothing about Marcus Garvey. We definitely don't teach about Marcus Garvey in school. And he is one, he inspired Martin Luther King. He inspired the Elijah Muhammad, Malcolm X, the Rastafari movement, which was by Leonard Howell. Leonard Howell was one of his ranking officers in the UNIA that we're going to talk about that Marcus Garvey developed. So look that brother name up, Leonard Howell. He started the Rastafari movement once Marcus Garvey got deported back to Jamaica in 1925. He followed in 1933 and he created the Rastafari movement. So the Rastafari movement is a branch off of the UNIA. So do your homework. Again, his name is Leonard Howell. And he also inspired Nelson Mandela. And we're going to see the things that Marcus Garvey did. Why did he inspire these great men to do what they did? Marcus Mosiah Garvey was born in St. Ann Bay, Jamaica on August 17, 1887. His childhood was deeply rooted in a peasant environment which largely surrounded him. He once described his uncle, from whom he sometimes worked, as a sharecropper. His own parents also engaged in a small-scale peasant farming. Garvey was not a typical peasant experience. However, his father, a descendant of the Maroons of Jamaica, African ex-slaves who successfully defended the slave regime. For those that don't know who the Maroons was a group of ancestors that was enslaved, that fought for their freedom, and they fought and freed themselves, and they actually came back and helped free a lot of other slaves. And a lot of the other slave plantations of the slave owners were scared of these people who they called the Maroons. So they let these people be on a certain thing of land. So just do some research on the Maroons, The slave regime was also anguished him from a typical peasant in his father's possessions, a library among whose volumes Garvey developed an earlier taste of reading. His childhood was characterized by an earlier and academic elementary education, supplemental by private tutoring and on Sunday school. His leadership ability seems to manifest itself from a very beginning, for his physical proudness gave him a position of eminence among his peers. At the age of 14, by which time he already became an apprentice to a local printer, Garvey left school. 2 years later, he moved to Kingston, Jamaica, capital city, where he obtained work. By the time he was 18, he had a large printing establishment. This was outstanding achievement, making Garvey the youngest foreman printer in Kingston. At the time, when many foremans were still being imported by Great Britain and Canada, participations in a strike during which his consensus to lead the workers, despite assurance of favor from management, cost him his job. He then obtained new employment with a government printery. In Kingston, Garvey quickly immersed himself in the intellectual and political life in the city. By 1909, his political involvement had brought him into a national club organization by a lawyer and legislative council. Member Sandy Cox, Garvey was elected one of the assistant secretary of this club, which sought to combat privilege and evil of British colonialism on the island. In 1910, Garvey embarked on the first of his many wonders in foreign land. He went to Costa Rica, where he worked for a while as a timekeeper on a United Fruit Company banana plantation, and as a laborer on a pier at Port Lemon. Editor a paper, La Niso, harassed West Indian labor workers there, was arrested for urging workers to fight for better conditions, and was eventually expelled from the country or left to escape the authorities. You're gonna see this a lot, where he was jailed a few times, and this wasn't the first. This was his first time, but this won't be his last time being expelled or deported from a country. He continued for the next year or so to wander through Latin America, going to such places Panama and and Ecuador, where West Indian workers had migrated in large numbers in search of work. He observed the universal digression of a black race wandering intermittently to finance his traveling, starts another small paper in Colón, Panama, and agitated among black workers. A black worker in Colón at the time remember meeting Garvey around 1912 as he addressed the prominent and black Colón Federal Labor Union. There is a possibility that Garvey may have stopped briefly, perhaps in transit at a seaport somewhere in the United States during this period. From Central America, Garvey returned briefly to Jamaica, and by the autumn of 1912, understand by the lack of money, he was in England, where his only surviving sister, Indiana, was working as a governess. In England, he indulged his love in public speaking. Excuse the typo. At Hyde Park Speakers Corners was a regular visitor to the House of Commons and worked for African Times and Oriented Reviews, a foremost Pan-Africanist journal of the day. He found the time to visit Scotland, Ireland, France, Italy, Spain, Australia, Hungary, and Germany. Garvey said later that he attended some lectures in law by Birkbeck College of the University of London. By July 1930, Garvey was not surprisingly almost destined, and he applied for government assistance, possibly because his job at the African Times and the Oriental Reviews, however, is an article for the magazine was published in October issue. He was able to eke out an extension for almost another year. So this was he had went into England after he was in Costa Rica, where he's at the age of 14, he dropped out of school. He went to go work for a printer company. He later on he went to Kingston. He moved from St. Ann Bay. He moved to Costa Rica, not Costa Rica, but he moved to Kingston, where he got a job and became a manager at the age of 18. He lost his job because you can see that he was always trying to fight for the rights, fight for our rights, and fight for injustice, fight for those that was being mistreated. He went into Costa Rica, the same thing. He went into Costa Rica and he had few jobs. He got a job as an editor. He got a job as a timekeeper. He worked on the pier, and as he worked on the pier, certain things that went on the job, it was certain things that went on the job. So he rallied the people along. He rallied the people along and got them to fight for some of the mishaps that was going on the job. And by him doing that, he got expelled from Costa Rica. He went into Panama. He started his own editor company, or his own printing company, right? And then he went on into England, where his sister was at. So he went into England, where his sister was at, and he went and worked for a journalist, African Times and Oriental Reviews, where he wrote articles. But at that time, he became destitute before the article came out. So we were just talking about he's in England, but before he went into England, he set up where he went into certain places. We talked about he went into France, Italy, Spain, Germany, Australia, those certain places. Hold on, let me make sure I didn't skip anything. Okay. By May 1914, when he was probably again without employment, the Anti-Slavery and Abolitionist Protection Society intervened on his behalf, dispatching him as a colonial officer with an offer of contribution from the society if a colony officer would put up some of the money to repatriate him to Jamaica. Early in June, the society informed the colonial office that Garvey managed to do without the largest of these two agencies. However, he succeeded in raising his fair home and left England in June of 1914. Garvey's first sojourn in England was a great importance to his career. The working of British democracy made a lasting impression on him, and like later generations of visitors from a colonized world of a metropolitans, he noted a contrast to the artistry which they very same colonizers maintain, and their colonizers will maintain their tropical dependency. He was offered a call in the year to come for an extension to British justice to a colony. England gave him an opportunity to enhance his already wide knowledge of the worldwide suffering of Black people. In the pages of the African Times and Oriental Reviews, there appear regularly articles by and about such leading Black figures as Booker T. Washington, Edward Willard Balin, John Edward Bruce, W.E.D. Du Bois, and William Ferris, to name a few. Some of these will before long be associated in the United States. Garvey came into contact with a Black seaman and student who suffering his abuse, and with the many people of color who visited the office of the journal. And the fact that the journal combined the Pan-African outlook with wide coverage in the Middle and Far Eastern nationalism struggle, and indeed all anti-colony struggles, contribute further to the Garvey growth and influence of the further outlook. Garvey arrived back in Jamaica in July 15, 1914. He had headed a Bristol with ideals of making a living and founding a racial movement. To secure the former, he tried selling greetings and condolence cards and monumental tombstones. To secure a later, he formed 5 days after his arrival the Universal Negro Improvement and Conversation Association and African Community Imperial League. The title bore testimony to the enlarged visions brought about his travels and fear of possible extinction. In this he wrote, "For I, the last 10 years, have given my time to study of the studies of the conditions of the Negro. Here, there, and everywhere, I have come to realize that he's still the object of degradations and pity the world over, in the sense that he has no status, social nationalism, and commercials, with the modern of exceptions of the United States of America." So we talked about Marcus Garvey. You know, he went into, he traveled, he went from his hometown into Kingston. He went from his time into Costa Rica, from Costa Rica into Panama. He went from Panama to England. And then from England, he went to Spain, Italy, France, Hungary, Australia. He went into all these different places. And as he went into all these different places, no matter where he went around the world, he started to see that Black people all over the planet was being mistreated. We had no type of social status, no nationality, and we was at the bottom of the barrel. We was being mistreated all over the world. So Marcus Garvey wanted to try to create something to counter Black people all over the world being mistreated, being beaten, being enslaved, being in servitude, being financially illiterate, not owning anything. Garvey became a president and travel commissioner of the new organization, among whose stated objects were the fosters of the universal confraternity among the race, the establishment of the central nation for Black people, and setting up an educational institution, a pledge to work for better conditions among the race Negroes everywhere. Amy Ashwood, whom had met at a weekly meeting of the East Queen St. Baptist Literary and Debating Society, became his secretary. Associated was formed, she said, on their second meeting. A few days later, the inaugural meeting took place at a college hall, Kingston, presided over by a mayor of Kingston. Recruiting was slow, even though Garvey worked tirelessly and succeeded in establishing himself in the minds of many of the agitators. So we can go back here where he was trying to set up an educational institution and pledge the works for better conditions among the race of Negroes. So basically, like I said, he started seeing the plights of black people. You know, we being miseducated, because we know over here it was against the law for black people to read and write. So he, even after we became free, you know, we did do better with our educational institutions, but he wanted us to be more educated, and he wanted us to have, well, basically during this time, we know he wanted us to have more educational institution of our own, have our own businesses. You know what I'm saying? And if we have our own better working conditions as well. After about a year, the organization could boast only about 100 members. Up to this time, activities was largely confined in Kingston's. In November 1915, however, first public meeting outside of Kingston was held in Garvey's hometown of St. Ann's Bay. The Jamaican town reported, right merely did the people of the town turn out to listen to their fellow townsmen. Garvey, who planned to undertake a fundraiser lecture tour in the United States beginning this very month. And this is how Marcus Garvey ended up in the United States. We're going to see why he ended up in the United States. We know he traveled everywhere, but he wanted to get a tour together to try to raise funds. We're going to see why he ended up in the United States and why he why he wanted to go on tours to create, to get money for what? We'll see. But this is how we ended up in the United States. And we know that the UNIA started in Jamaica first. It started in 1914, as we talked about a while ago. Once he got back into England, once he left England and came back to Jamaica, he set up the Universal Improvement Negro Association. So that was started in Jamaica first, and now and later on, once he got to the United States, it was set up in the United States. And just continue to follow me. This brother here was so powerful, and I can see why a lot of our civil rights leaders, such as Malcolm X, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and the Nation of Islam, Nelson Mandela, Leonard Howard, and other individuals was inspired by this individual, because this brother went on to do a lot of great things. But just follow me. Okay. Riley Merely, okay, where was I? The Jamaica Times reported Riley merely did the people of the town turn out to listen to their fellow townsmen. Garvey, who planned to undertake a fundraiser lecture tour in the United States beginning this very month, having received an assurance of support from Booker T. Washington. And for those, I talked about Booker T. Washington in one of my other things when I talked about the Niagara movement. When I talked about the Niagara movement was a spinoff. Well, the NAACP was a spinoff of the Niagara movement by W.E.B. Du Bois and William Monroe. And W.E.B. Du Bois had an issue with Booker T. Washington. We know Booker T. Washington was a dean of the Tuskegee institution, and they had issues. But Booker T. Washington had heard about Garvey and actually was going to bring Garvey to the United States in 1915. Okay, to receive assurance support by Booker T. Washington. But later, the death caused him to postpone his trip until 1916. So he was going to come out in 1915, and he had the support of Booker T. Washington. And due to Booker T. Washington dying in 1915, like it said, it postponed his tour until 1916. Garvey arrived in New York on March the 23rd, 1916 for the lecture tour, which he thought would last 5 months and would be confined to black audience monthly in the South. He arranged for his mail to be delivered to an address in Jamaica during his absence and left it to be known wherever he went in America that he was raising funds for an industrial institution to establish in Jamaica. So this is what he went on tour for. He went on a tour, a speaking tour, to raise money or to raise funds for an industrial institution. Because again, he went all over the world and he saw that everywhere that he went, black people was at the bottom of the barrel. We didn't own anything. You know what I'm saying? We was mistreated. You know, so he wanted to create an industrial institution. So he wanted us to have our own. So this is what he went in. But this purpose was for Jamaica only. Because again, he started a UNIA in Jamaica first. And then he ended up in the United States on tour to raise money for an industrial institution. And that is to create different types of economic opportunities. You know, create other types of jobs, owning land. So you're going to see what Marcus Garvey ended up starting to do. And it started out as an industrial institution in Jamaica, but he ended up making it started doing it in the United States. Garvey adverted into the United States did not find him as much a stranger to the conditions there as some are led to believe. For one thing, his wide reading of racial matters had obviously include race conditions in North America. So it was no surprise for him to come to the United States because he had already been all over the world, everywhere else. He's been in Africa. He's been in the Caribbean. He's been in South America, and then he ended up in the United States, or North America, what we call the United States of America. And he see the place for black people was the same. We were still being mistreated by people. You know what I'm saying? We still didn't have a pot to piss in and a window to throw it out of. So it wasn't a surprise when he got here to see we was at the bottom of the barrel, to see racism, to see us being mistreated. By March 1916, Garvey sensed a mission, his conviction that he had been called upon to emancipate his race, to free his race. He developed in an academy degree shortly before leaving Jamaica. He had written in a letter to Robert Russia Moulton, Booker T. Washington, successor at the Tuskegee. I am not talking with you as a man with a mission I am talking with you as a man with a mission from high God. Even though he still thought that Jamaica would be the main field of his extortions, he had nevertheless already mapped out a course he was to follow over the next few years. He wrote in the same letter, I have many large schemes on my mind for the advancement of my people that I cannot expose at the present to the public, as in such a case my hope immediate success would be defeated, as my enemy are so many and they are ever anxious to misrepresent me. I have firstly found a press of our own and to get some working start so as is demonstrated. So you can see right here, as I explained in some other videos, that during the civil rights, during the civil rights movement, you had two different civil rights movements. You had a movement that was the separatists, which most people, when you think about the separatist movement, there was those that did not want to integrate, that did not want to integrate with other people, did not want to give up what they had just to integrate. Those were called separatists. So most of us, when we hear about that, we think about the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, the Nation of Islam, we think about Malcolm X because that was their ideology. They did not want to integrate with the oppressor. And then you had another group of people such Dr. Martin Luther King, who was an integrationist, even though at the last minute he had an interview before he died and said because he fought for integration. So he fought for segregation. He wanted us to integrate. But at the end, he said he believed he has pushed his people, he has integrated his people into a burning house. So he understood that integration was going to be bad for black people. We gave up everything to integrate with everybody else, which you can see today. We don't own a darn thing. We don't own nothing. So, but my point was, we don't talk about Marcus Garvey. Marcus Garvey set that standard of separatism, having your own, creating your own economic systems, creating your own schools, your own restaurants, your own printing companies, your own, et cetera, et cetera. Even though we seen this with Tulsa, Oklahoma, we seen Little Africa, what we call Tulsa, Oklahoma. We had all those things before we integrated. But we know the United States came in from the air and bombed those people in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And we know that white supremacists came in and burnt down things, and we tried to develop it back. But then we see another issue come in where Marcus Garvey come in, but he takes it to a whole nother level. In many large schemes of my mind, I advance my people that I cannot expose at the present of the public, as many copy in the minute such would be defeated, as my enemies are so many and they are ever anxious to misrespect me. I have firstly to find a press of my own to get some of working started, so as the demonstration. Once in the United States, Garvey found lodging with Jamaicans family in Harlem, came down with pneumonia, obtained work as a printer, and saved enough to start out his own fundraising tour through the states. He was a hustler. By June, he was lecturing in Boston, and by November, demonstrating again the amazing mobility which had characterized his Central American and Europe visit. Among other places, New York, Boston, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, Baltimore, Washington, D.C., and Chicago. He had also met a goodly number of prominent nation Afro-American leaders. Among them was John Edward Bruce, whom called a true Negro, a man whom had the strongest regards, Dr. R.R. Wright Jr., Dr. Parks, Vice President of the Baptist Union, Dr. Trilly of the Methodist Episcopal Church of Philadelphia, Reverend J.C. Anderson, whom had described only as being a Queen chapter, Miss Ida Wells Barnett of the Anti-Lynching fame, magazine editor Fenton Johnson, and William H. Ferris Bruce had been an agent for a regular contribution to the African Times and Oriental Review. Ferris had once written an article from the magazine in which he praised Marcus Garvey. October 1913 articles which had appeared a few months before his. Ferris was later to edit Garvey Weekly Negro World from the 1920s and 1930s. In the Negro World, this is Marcus Garvey first newspaper was the Negro World. Then later on he created, so he had the Negro World and he had the Garvey Daily Negro Times. And he held varieties of high office within the UNIA. Bruce, after an initial period of skepticism, became a regular contributor to and member of the editorial board of both the Negro World and the Garvey Daily Negro Times. Until his death in 1924, he remained status of Garvey supporters among the Afro-American intelligence. Hold on, y'all. I need it. I should have made this bigger. All right. Give me 1 second. I just wanted, that's what I should have did. I should have had it in the position sitting thing. Okay. All right. That's better right there. It's better now. All right. Garvey tour took him through 38 states and lasted about a year. He returned at the end of the New York City, where he established a temporary base. Harlem, only recently converted into black sections of New York, was already a virtual capital of the black world. Harlem, however, was but a macrocosm of the black world of the world period. Thus, subjugation of African by European imperialism was still a fresh memorial. In response to this, an infinite number of nationalism of Pan-Africanism had come into being in Africa, Europe, North America, West Indies, Central and South America. Everywhere the black people lived, all looking toward the restoration of African independence. Apart from African questions, black communities everywhere had local problems in their own. The black, meanwhile, almost everywhere in the state subjugation, Garvey, his involvement in printers' strike. He, in particularly in Jamaica National Club, and his agitation among black workers in Central America, and his travels to Europe, and his formation of the UNIA, conversation had dropped out of the title along the way, and long embodied a spirit of black protest which characterized the age. It was inevitable, therefore, that he should be tempted by Harlem, the most highly political black community in the world. In June 1912-1917, Harlem, initially Herbert Harrison, invited Garvey to address a mass meeting attendance by 2,000 held at the Bethel A&M Church for the purpose of organizing Harrison Liberty League. Garvey himself preferred his tour through the states. He held not a successful meeting, in the course of which he fell off the platform. The Liberty League meeting was wonderful, however, for he was tremendous success. Shortly before, or perhaps shortly after Harrison meeting, Garvey began to hold weekly meetings his own every Sunday at 3 p.m. in Harlem Lafayette Hall at 131 Street of Lenox Avenue. The meeting billed as head of the UNIA and the ACL of Jamaica. At one of these Sunday meetings, July 8, less than a month after the Liberty League gathering, Garvey address was devoted to denunciation of the conspiracy of the East St. Louis riots. The New York branch of the UNIA may already have been formed by this time, for the associate address was given as 235 West 131st Street. The subject lecture showed that Garvey had once again demonstrated a preponderance in a Costa Rica and Panama, and quickly became embroiled in a purely local issue of wherever he happened to be. Garvey's first UNIA branch in New York, as well as the second attempt in earlier 1918, was envisaged as being auxiliary to the Jamaican headquarters. Garvey himself, as a president of Jamaica Division, did not hold office in them, but these efforts to establish a UNIA branch disrupted by attempts by socialists and Republicans to turn them into political clubs. On the third attempt, based on wishes of the nucleus of the 13 members, Garvey consented to become president of the New York branch, to consecrate the decision that he had in all likelihood already contemplated, namely to cast down his buckle in the United States with a move. New York City supplemented Kingston, Jamaica, and as UNIA headquarters. The schism developed in this new attempt to meanwhile move from Lafayette Hall to the Palace Casino, where it remained for most of the 1918. Once Garvey had decided to remain in the United States, excuse the typo, in the United States, he moved on with new vigor. The UNIA was incorporated under the laws of New York on July the 2nd, 1918. On July the 31st, the African Community League, which is the ACL, was incorporated as a business corporation. A month and two later, the Negro World appeared, destined to become the most widely circulated of race papers and a band of European colonialism. Garvey initially edited it. The earliest issue was distributed free by being pushed under people's doors in the early hours. So when he created the U.N.I.A. created the newspaper, the Negro World, and the Garvey Daily Negro Time, you know, it was given away for free. He was pushing it up under the doors. During the years, Garvey embarked on his first funded raising tour outside of New York after moving the UNIA headquarters. His first stop was Detroit, where he was hit in the head by a stone thrown by a heckler. On his return to New York, his secretary, Amy Ashwood, who had accompanied him, was summoned to a district attorney office as a total. She wrote later of 17 times authorities, it seems, suspect Garvey of raising funds for a non-existing bank to Africa enterprise. On November the 11th, 1918, the New York Times reported a meeting of 5,000 persons presided over by Garvey's at the Palace Casino. You can see his influence started to get developed. The meeting celebrated the end of the World War I by calling on an Allied power to hand over the ex-German colony in Africa to black rule. Several persons, among them socialists and Philip Randolph and Ida Wells Barnett, were nominated a meeting to lobby on behalf of the UNIA at the upcoming Paris Peace Conference. The UNIA eventually dispatched a Haitian as High Commissioner to lobby during a conference sign. Most African Americans were being denied passports to France by the United States government. By 1919, Garvey was already firmly established as one of Harlem's most important radical figures. And it was during the year that his fame spread over a globe. Before the year ended, he would be regularly discussed in the press, in a governmental circle in Europe, Africa, West Indies, and everywhere. In March of 1919, at another large meeting at the Palace Casino, Garvey claimed that W.E. Du Bois had humbugged the activities of his highly commissioned in France. The desire for an Afro-American lobby at the Paris Peace Conference was also responsible for bringing together a group of Harlem radicals and other prominent individuals at the home of the wealth by the race of conscious Madam C.J. Walker. A lot of us know who Madam C.J. Walker is. We know most say that she was the one that created the straightening comb, which she wasn't the one that created the straightening comb, but she did have something to do with the relaxer. Garvey was among those present at the time meeting, out of which grew a short-lived international league of darker people. In June 1919, Garvey incorporated his Black Star Line Steamship Corporation. By this time, Garvey claimed later the UNIA had about 30 branches and over 2 million members. I'm going to say that again. In June, Garvey incorporated his Black Star Line Steamship Corporation. By this time, Garvey claimed later that the UNIA had about 30 branches and over 2 million members. This figure apparently included sympathizers being reached as well as a member in any strict sense, but spread of his ideal by this time could not be gainsaid. As early as 1918, the Negro world had been reaching places as far as Panama, and thrown out 1919 Garveyites were blamed by colonial authorities for anti-white riots in Jamaica, Trinidad, British Honduras, among others. other places. In October 1919, Garvey fast approached the peak of his career. Added his closely escape from the untimely death, several shots were fired at him by one George Tyler, to whom which found their mark. The wounds were minor. However, Tyler died mysteriously, supposedly jumped to his death from the cell from where he was awaiting a court appearance. He was widely suspected that he blamed to implicate others in his life on the Christmas Day of 1919. And see, I didn't even know that until I started digging deep about Marcus Garvey. I didn't even know that he had been shot before, but he had been shot. Garvey married Amy Ashwood during the lavish speculator of Liberty Hall, now the UNIA owns meeting place. And Anna Ashwood, as you remember, she was his secretary. She started out as his secretary in the United States. In 1916, she had left Jamaica for Panama, but had become reunited with Garvey in the spring of 1918 when she moved to the United States. The marriage was over by the early 1920s. The couple having parted companies amid a welter of accusations and counter-accusations concerning infidels, financials, misdealings, and political strategies. The year 1920 witnessed the first international convention of the Negro people of the world, organizations by Garvey. At the opening sessions of the Madison Square Garden, New York, an overflow crowd of 25,000 filled the arena and spilled out into the streets. The other sessions took place in Liberty Hall in Harlem. Delegates who came from all over the black world adopted the Declarations of Rights of the Negroes people in the world. Declarations listed the main grievances of the race and demanded their resolution. Notice was served on European colonialism that the black man had an inherited right to possession himself of African, regardless of the claims of any other race or nation. Demands were made for the capitalization of the N in Negro, for the teaching of black history in school, and from an end of lynchings and sundries of other discriminations. The red, the black, and the green were adopted as a color of the race. That's why you see me with the red and black and green all the time. You see me with the red and black and green around my neck. You come to my home, you see the red and black and green flags everywhere. August the 31st, the last day of the month-long convention, was proclaimed an international holiday for black people, and the universal Ethiopian anthem was adopted. During the course of the convention, Garvey was elected the President General of the U.N.I.A. and Provision President of Africa. The Mayor of Monrovia, Liberia, Gabriel Johnson, was elected Supreme Potentate or ceremony leader. Several others were elected leaders in various parts of the black world. Also in 1920 was a birth of the UNIA Negro Factories Corporation, which over the next 2 or 3 years managed a number of UNIA businesses, including laundries, restaurants, all doll factories, tailor shops, grocery stores, millinery establishments, and a printing press company, which provided about 700 jobs. So you can see that the UNIA businesses, they had laundromats, restaurants, doll factories, tailor shops, grocery stores, military establishment, printing pressing companies, and they provided over 700 jobs for our people in the community. Some of these virtues had been in operation since 1918, for Ida Wells Barnett reported having been shown a UNIA restaurant and some unspecific smaller undertakings by Garvey in that year. In 1921, Garvey was unquestionable the leader of the largest organization of its type in the history of the race. He has succeeded as no one independence and defiance against colonialism and oppression, which characterized the new Negro spirit of the age. As of August the 1st, 1921, the UNIA contained 480 charters, divisions plus 420 not yet chartered. There were an additional 19 charters, making a total of 18 and 59 branches. All right, here is the Universal African Motor Club. The UANMC served as a women's military auxiliary, and similar to men, they were to be trained as military discipline by the officers of the ULA and trained to drive and repair cars. So the UNIA also had, again, Marcus Garvey and the UNIA, they had their own businesses. So they had their own businesses and they had their own military factories. You can see here the pictures of the woman. And this is the Universal African Motor Club military auxiliary for the women. The legions, as they were nicknamed, served as a military auxiliary for the national and local division. Although the legions was organized in late 1919, they became an official auxiliary during the 1920 UNIA convention. Their emblems of official coats of arms was crest or a shield bearing a color of the red African and the green. So you can see the UNI military right here. Auxiliary, I just showed the women. Here's the men. All right, the UNIA, Marcus Garvey's UNIA also had the Black Cross nurses. They had their own nurses. Also, the Black Cross nurses, officially the Universal African Black Cross nurses, is an international organization of nurses which was founded in 1920. Based upon the model of the Red Cross, the organization was the women auxiliary of the Universal Negro Improvement Association and the African Community League, the UNIA and the ACL, and was established to provide health services and education people of African descent. The Black Star Line. The UNIA also had ships because, again, Marcus Garvey, the movement was for us to have our own. So the movement was to import and export goods. And the movement of the boat was also going back to Africa as well. The Black Star Line, the BSL, was a steamship corporation established in 1919 by the Pan-Africanist Marcus Garvey, the leader of the United Negro Improvement Association. The name inspired by a British luxury steamship line called the White Star Line was applied to the highest ambition of ultimately mismanaged corporation, similar to the UNIA Negro Factory Corporation. The BSL was part of the largest effort of the parts of Garvey to encourage black self-determination and economic independence. Garvey saw that blacks across the globe was largely being exploited and left out of the global economics, which is still going on today. The BSL will partly remedy the situation by faculties, the shipments of goods amongst the far-flung people of African diaspora, thereby fostering the growth of a self-reliance and resilient global black economics. The BSL would also transport immigrants to Africa for the establishment of the black nation states. Garvey started to solidify funds for the Black Star Line from the UNIA members at the meeting in 1919 and soon raised enough money to establish a corporation. The BSL shares sold for $5, which allowed blacks of modest means to own a piece of the UNIA largest economic ventures. And this was only for black people in the black community. This was not for any other race. any venture that the UNIA had, you could buy shares in it, whether it was the Black Star Line ship that they had, whether it was the restaurants where they had, whether it was the schools that they had, whether it was the sewing companies, that they had, and other things that they had. You could buy shares. It was only exclusive to people of color. Between 1919 and 1920 alone, the UNIA raised $800,000. In 1920 alone, the UNIA raised $800,000. In a same year, purchased the BSL first ship. This is the ship right here, the Yarmouth, a 30-year-old vessel, lasted use in the World War I as a freighter. You can see right here in the headline of the paper right here to capitalize it right here. Garvey's unparalleled success had an effect and array against him and most powerful conglomerates of a hostile force. The United States government was against him because they considered all black radicals subversive. European government was against him because he was threatened to stabilize if their colonialism. The community were against whom begins him, excuse the typo, y'all. I was typing fast and I was trying to hurry up and get through it. Because his successful kept black workers out of their grasp. And anytime you can see this, any of our black leaders, you can see a lot of our black leaders was always being assassinated and ostracized. You know what I'm saying? Because we was trying to do something for ourselves. And Marcus Garvey and the UNIA and the ACL was beginning to become a threat for the United States government, because you can see this brother came in and he began to set up black economics everywhere. So he set up all the UNIA. You could join the UNIA. The UNIA had its own military factory. The UNIA had its own black nurse, a black nurse society. The UNIA had its own store, its own everything. So you can, and it provided over 700 jobs in our community. So you can see the government was going against that because they the government so reliant on us to stay at the bottom of the barrel, for us to stay financial and economically illiterate, for us to stay particularly dumb, to stay up under their thumb, to always depend on the government. But Marcus Garvey wanted to create something that we for ourselves. So we create our own. We don't need no assistance from nobody else. So he started the UNIA and the ACL, and the UNIA created all these things. And you can see how it became a threat. In 1921, an opposition from all these forces escalated to a remarkable extent. First, the United States Department of the state almost prevented Garvey from re-entering the country after a short trip to the Caribbean area. He managed to make it back. That's exactly, they didn't want it to come larger than them. Re-entering the country after a short trip of the Caribbean areas. He managed to make it back. However, barely in a time for his second international convention. Then at his annual convention, the communists, spearheaded by the Black Auxiliary, the African Blood Brotherhood, made an unsuccessful bid to capture his following. Meanwhile, the NAACP, through its major black spokesman, W.E.B. Du Bois, was steadily increasing its campaign to attack in an organ of crises of elsewhere. And you can see right here, W.E. Du Bois had an issue against Marcus Garvey in the UNIA movement. And you have to understand something. Marcus Garvey taught separatism. He taught separatism. He did not want us to integrate. And what's the name? W.E. Du Bois was an integration. If you go back and look at one of my videos when I talk about the Niagara movement, the Niagara movement was a black organization, civil rights organization at first, but then as the Niagara movement with W.E. Du Bois and William Monroe, the membership later on started dwindling, and William Monroe left the Niagara movement. W.E.D. Du Bois started bringing in white people into the organization. So when he started bringing white people into the organization, then it started dwindling down, and those people, those few whites that was in the Niagara movement, spun off with what the Niagara movement had and created the NAACP. That's why I say the NAACP is not a black organization. It was founded by white people that was in the Niagara movement. You can go back and look at one of my reading and sharing videos, and you can see where I break down and go through the whole Niagara movement up into the NAACP and afterward. And then W.E.D. Du Bois was the first member on the board of the NAACP, which the NAACP became an integrational organization. It's an integrational organization. It's not a black organization. It was an integrational organization. And that's why W.E.D. Du Bois began to have a problem with Marcus Garvey, because Marcus Garvey was for blacks, you know, and blacks only. He was about, you know what I'm saying, basically before the term black power even came in, he was about black power. He was about black economics. You know what I'm saying? So this is what he was about. So this is why W.E.D. Du Bois had a problem with that. He was about integration, and Marcus Garvey was about separatism. Peace, brother Mike. The capture followed. Meanwhile, the NAACP, through its major black spokesman, W. Du Bois, was steady increasing its campaign of attacks in its organs, the crises, and elsewhere. The black socialists too had begun the criticism of Garvey, and the British authorities were busy pursuing the policies that had begun in 1919, abandoning the Negro world, prohibiting the UNIA officials from entering the colonies of general, doing whatever they could to thwart the spreads of Garvey influence, because Garvey influence became everywhere. The UNIA, Garvey had 2 million members, and I'm gonna prove and show you this man had 2 million members, and it spread it from just the United States. It went into the Caribbean. It went into South America. It went into Africa. So you had UNIA and the ACL movements all over the world because of the heavy influence of Marcus Garvey and the great things that he was doing for the community. Finally, on January the 12th, 1922, Garvey was arrested for mail fraud. This was a signal for redoubling efforts on the part of his enemies, who presumed his guilt and called his arrest for deportation. Despite all of this, the UNIA managed to push ahead, and this is all that they could get on the man, was mail fraud. You know what I'm saying? They were trying to throw a charge on him again. We see that the government has started having problems with Marcus Garvey because of his influence, and we was no longer relying on them, but we was relying on ourselves and creating stuff for our own self. So the government was against it. And again, when we have these great leaders that rise up and have this heavy influence, you know, they either assassinate the leaders or they ostracize them. So they created a charge of mail fraud. Despite all of this, the UNIA managed to push ahead. The Daily Negro Times appeared in 1922, and the Black Man magazine was projected but did not, in fact, appear until much later. Garvey's second marriage took place during this year to a private secretary, Amy Jacques. He got something for these Amys. You know, his first wife was named Amy. In 1923, he was convicted on mail charges in connection with the Black Star Line. Yet Garvey was now claiming a membership of 6,900,000 branches. This man had 6 million members and 900 branches. 500 of these branches and as little less than half of the membership was said to be in the United States. Garvey's last full years as a free man in the United States was 1924. During this year, remarkable faith which followed places in him was again demonstrated. When they subscribed enough to the launch a new steamship line, the Black Cross Navigation and the Trading Company, the year of 1924 also saw the blocking of Garvey's attention to set up a base in Liberia. During this year, too, the UNIA launched a Negro political union designed to bring its voting strength to bear on America and other election endorsement candidates based on their records of dealing with race, irrespectivity, parties affiliation. Excuse me. In February 1925, Garvey's appeal was turned down and he entered the federal penitentiary at Atlanta. What his enemies hoped to obtain through his improvement did come to pass. Schisms appeared in the American movement, resulted by 1926 in a splinter in the New York branch, the largest of all, estimated 35,000 members at one time. These strange occasions by Garvey departures was, however, still relevant minor for Garvey. Even from jail, managed to maintain some control, appointing, dismissing officials, and conferring with his aides. An extraordinary conference in Detroit in 1926, the Secretary General G. Enema Carter reported 114 domestic branches, 250 foreign, and 91 new ones, whether foreign or domestic not specified, for a grand total of 1,120. There were 25 pending applications for charters. So you can see, even after this man had 6 million members, and even after he went to jail for a bogus charge of mail fraud, his influence was still heavily while he was in jail, and branches were still popping up everywhere. The discovery in 1970, the UNIA records include membership files providing the unique opportunity to verify these figures. According to the data in these records, most complied from about 1925 through 1928. There were 725 UNIA branches in the United States, possible 723. See the appendix of 271 outside the United States, possible 273, making a grand total of 996. The data include 11 branches not calculated according to the location. Now, Bears, now call for you making this up. Table 1. Distribution of the UNI branches in the United States of 1926. States, number of branches, states and branches. So let's go through it. Louisiana had 71 branches. Virginia had 41 branches. North Carolina had 47. Pennsylvania, 45. West Virginia, 44. Mississippi, 44. Ohio, 39. Arkansas, 38. Florida, 32. New Jersey, 31. Oklahoma, 28. Georgia, 26. South Carolina, 24. Illinois, 23. Missouri, 21. Alabama, 11. Connecticut, 10. Maryland, 10. Tennessee, 9. Texas, 9. Kentucky, 9. Kansas, 9. Massachusetts, 9. Arizona, 4. Colorado, 3. Delaware, 3. Washington, 3. District of Columbia, 2. Iowa, 2. Rhode Island, 2. California, 16. New York, 16. Michigan, 14. Indiana, 13. Nebraska, 1. Oregon, 1. Utah, 1. Wisconsin, 1. Sources: adopting from the data in the UNIA Central Division, New York Files, Schomburg Collection, New York Public Library. That's right. They will incarcerate you on all type of bogus charges, man, especially when you have this much influence and this much power, man. This man, and this here is this man influence. This is the biggest organization I have seen till today. 6 million members, and these members extend from the Caribbean to South America and in Africa. And I'm giving you I just gave you the United States. I just gave you the United States. Now look at here. The distribution of the UNIA branches outside the United States. Outside the United States now. Cuba, 52 branches. Panama, 47. Trinidad, 30. Costa Rica, 23. Canada, 15. Jamaica, 11. Spanish Honduras, 18. South America, 8. British Guyana, 7. Colombia, 6. The Dominican Republic, 5. Guatemala, 5. Nicaragua, 1. Barbados, 4. Canal Zone, 2. Southwest Africa, 2. Wales, 2. Antigua, 1. Australia, 1. Bermuda, 1. Brazil, 1. Dominica, 1. Dutch Guiana, 1. Ecuador, 1. Grenada, 1. Haiti, 1. Nevis, 1. Nigeria, which is in West Africa, 1. Mexico, 4. Sierra Leone, which is in West Africa, 3. England, 2. Gold Coast, 2, which is in West Africa. Liberia, Africa, West. Bahamas, 2. St. Kitts, 1. St. Lucas, 1. St. Thomas, 1. St. Venice, 1. Venezuela, 1. Sources adopted from the data in the UNIA Central Division, New York Files, Schomburg's collection, New York Public Library. So this information is public. You can go get the information. So you can see that this brother was heavily influenced, and the UNIA spread it everywhere. An important conclusion to draw from the figures in this chapter is that the UNIA continued to expand after Garvey's 1995 incarceration. Some branches was undoubtedly disbanded even as new ones were being added, but the evidence as to how many is conclusive. Conclusions. Certainly by 1926, some branches not sending up to data information to the headquarters, but this had always been a problem and did not necessarily indicate lack of activities in those branches. Hold on one second, family. Oh yeah, it's still active right now. You got branches in New York. You still got branches in Texas. You got a branch in Louisiana. I can't think of the name of the branch, but shout out to Yashua Ashe, which is over the branch, which asked me a while back to join the UNIA in Louisiana, which is the branch is in Streetport. But I'm gonna show you something. You just asked the question, and Louisiana, you had 74 branches. This is the most branches ever in the United States, the Caribbean, South America, and North America. You had 74 branches. So you still have those branches that are relevant in Louisiana. I don't know what all parts of Louisiana the branches are in or how many are today, but I know Streetport has a branch there that I was offered to be a member of a while back here to join. And again, shout out to Yashua Ashe. He was watching a while ago. He's probably off here now. He was doing something else, but shout out to that brother. We supposed to be linking up pretty soon to do a few things or whatever. All right. Meanwhile, the claimers for the Garvey release mounted. At one time demonstrated in Harlem, an estimated 150,000 people marched and jammed the sidewalks. The government, bewildered by the depth of the feeling shown for someone they liked to characterize as a crook, and perhaps viewing with apprehensions the upcoming election year, decided to commute his sentences, but with a departure. So you can see that a lot of 150,000 people marched and jammed, you know what I'm saying, for the freedom of Marcus Garvey. And By that, they released him. They commuted his sentence, but from them commuting his sentences, they didn't want him. I don't think it's none in Mississippi at this time, but we did have a few. We had 44 branches in Mississippi at one time, but I don't know if we got any branches in Mississippi at all now. But I was saying that after the government said, okay, we'll go ahead and release him. They released the brother, but we can't have this Negro. We can't have this nigger. We can't have him in the United States. We can't have him in North America. He got to go back there. He got to go back where he came from. So they commuted his sentence, but with a deportation. So they had to they told him, bro, you got to get the hell out of the country. You got to get the hell away from him. You got to pack your stuff up and you got to go. 5,000 loyal followers were on a hand at the New Orleans to listen to Garvey's farewell address from the deck of the vessel, taking him to the Caribbean. Hold on one second, y'all. I was supposed to have been checking something out. Oh, okay, this is another. Okay. All right. 5,000 loyal followers were on one hand at New Orleans to listen to Garvey's farewell address for the deck of the vessel, taking him to the Caribbean. They stood in the rain and sang the UNIA hymn, God Bless Our President, as the ship pulled away, bearing their leader from the scene of the greatest triumph, never to set foot in the United States again. When the ship stopped in Panama, Garvey was greeted by delegations from the local UNIA in the Jamaica, because remember, the UNIA was first started in 1914 in Jamaica first. And then we know later on in the United States, because he wanted to create an industrial institution for Jamaica, so he wanted to go on a tour. So he went on a tour, and what's the name was bagging him was Booker T. Washington. But we know he didn't come in 1915. He came because Booker T. Washington died in 1915, and he came later to the United States in 1916 on his speaking tour to raise funds to go back to Jamaica for his UNIA organization to start an industrial institution. But he ended up staying and started an industrial institution there, which I named all the things that the UNIA had for this, their own restaurants, shops, school, tailor shops, black nurse organization. They had their own military and et cetera, et cetera. When the ship stopped in Panama, Garvey was greeted by a delegation from the local UNIA in Jamaica, where he arrived on December the 10th in 1927. He was given a hero welcome as some of the largest crowds in the island. History turned to greet him. None in dismayed by his deportation. They said they was not dismayed, because this is not the first time Marcus Garvey was kicked out of a country. Remember during the early times when I was talking, Marcus Garvey, he at the age of 14, he dropped out of school and worked for a printing company, and then he left 2 years later and went to Jamaica, Kingston. He went to Kingston, Jamaica, and him being Kingston, Jamaica, he worked for a printing company, and then he became the manager over the printing company by the age of 18, and then he lost his job trying to help and protest and do different things because things weren't right on the job. He lost his job. Then he went to Costa Rica. He had plenty of jobs in Costa Rica, and then he organized a protest for certain things that was going on in the job, and the people kicked him. He kicked him out of Costa Rica. So this wasn't the first time. Garvey was set about making most of his adversity. In 1928, he visited England, presented and renewed petition to the League of Nations, and previously visited Canada. In August 1929, Garvey held the 6th International Convention in Jamaica. It was as spectacular as early ones in Harlem. A split occurred at the convention, resulting in the formation of a separate UNIA Incorporated. Headquarters in the United States, Garvey remained head of the faction, now calling it the UNIA and the ACL, August 1929 of the world. The UNIA was the headquarters was in the United States at first, and the international conventions that was held there was held in New York. Those conventions, but once he was deported, he came back. The sixth international convention was held in Jamaica. So the split came with the UNIA ACL, the United Negro Improvement Association, and the ACL. All right, hold on a second. Why this thing ain't doing this? All right. I'm gonna let y'all check this out. Oh shoot, hold on, let me go back. Give it a second to load. I want y'all to look at something. If it'll load, it's kind of being funny here. Hold on, let's do it like this. Come on now. Hold on, y'all. I'm trying to play a video, and now it's trying to act up. Oh boy. Let's see. Hold on. Let's see. All right. Maybe it's loading now. Maybe to play. Let's see what it'll do. Wow. I might not be able to load it. It's been playing. I've been playing it, making sure that it worked all day today, and now it's act like it don't even want to. Let me see. Come on and play for me, video. Oh man. Hold on, y'all. I'm gonna try it one more time. If not, I'm not gonna worry about it. Let's see. And enlarging it. Hold on. I just wanted y'all to hear how powerful the brothers spoke. We're gonna try it one more time. Bear with me. See if I can get it to go down. Come on now. Okay, there we go. There we go.
When I am dead, wrap the mantle of the red, the black, and the green around me. For in the new life I shall rise up with God's grace and blessing. To lead the millions of the heights and the triumph that you well know. Look for me in a world when I reform. Look for me all around you. For with God's grace I shall come back with countless millions of black men and women who have died in America, those who have died in the West Indies, and those who have died in Africa. To aid you in the fight for liberty, freedom, and life. that teaches you to depend upon another race is a leadership that will enslave.
Listen.
Any leadership that teaches you to depend upon another race is a leadership that will enslave. They gave leadership
Listen to the brother.
and that leadership made them slaves. But we have decided to find a leadership of our own to make ourselves free men. Our great scholars have advanced through the colleges and universities have thrown away the blessed record. Babylon did it. Assyria did it. France under Napoleon did it. Germany under Prince von Bismarck did it. England under America under George Washington did it. Africa with 400 million.
Y'all can hear the video, right? Let me know if y'all get the video. And listen to the brother if y'all can. Listen.
Then you will die. You race of cowards. You race of imbeciles. You race of good for nothing. If you cannot do what other men have done, what other nations have done, what other races have done, then you have better die.
Y'all can hear the video, right? Thumbs up, thumbs. Let me know if y'all can hear the video.
Can we do it? We can do it. We shall do it. We are praying to God for vision and for leadership. And He has given us a universal vision. A vision that will not limit our possibilities to America. A vision that will not limit our possibilities to the West Indies, but a vision that said it must be a free and redeemed Africa. Christ the crucified, Christ the despised. We appeal to you for help, for succor, for leadership. When you endeavor to carry your burden of the heights of Calvary, when white men scorn you, when white men scorn you, when white men spat upon you, when white men pierce your side on the with blood and water sport, it was a black man in the name of Simon the Syrian who took your cross and bore it up the heights of Calvary. And now that we are bearing our burden of being so heavy, we just ask that you just help us on up the heights. Oh yes, the cause is grand, the cause is true. Surely we shall not turn back. Oh, Ceylon, 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 almighty shepherd, say Ceylon, Ceylon until the flag of the red, the black and the green is pushed upon the hills of Africa. Because the time has come for the black man to forget his hero worship of other races and to create and emulate heroes of his own. We must canonize our own saints, create our own martyrs, and elevate the positions of fame and honor black men and women who have made a distinct contribution to our racial history. Sojourner Truth is worthy of a place of sainthood alongside the Joan of Arc. Christmas Addis and George William Gordon are entitled to the halo of martyrdom with no less glory than the martyrs of any other race. To certainly shows brilliancy of a soldier or a statesman outshine that of any other people, hence he's entitled to the highest place as a hero among men. Because Africa's created millions and countless millions of black men and women in war and peace, whose luster and bravery outshine that of any other people. So why not see good and perfection in ourselves? We must inspire our literature and promulgate the doctrine of our own without any apologies to the powers that be. That right is our God. Let sentiments and cross opinions go to the winds. We are entitled to our own opinion and are not obligated to abide by the opinions of others. If others laugh at you, return the laughter to them. If they limit you, return the compliment with equal force. Because they have no more right to dishonor, discredit you in manhood than you have in dealing with them.
Listen to brother. Listen to the brother.
Disrespect and disregard them when they violently treat you. Their arrogance is but skin deep, an assumption that has no foundation in morals or in law.
Let me just play a few more minutes of the video. I ain't gonna play the whole thing.
Their history is as rude in its primitiveness as ours. Their ancestors were running wild and living in trees of branches like monkeys as ours. They made human sacrifices, ate the flesh of their own dead and wild meat from beasts for centuries, even as they have accused us of doing. Their cannibalism is more prolonged than ours. When we were embracing the banks of the Nile, they were still drinking blood out of the skulls of their conquered dead. After our civilization had reached the new era of progress, they were still living in holes with bats, rats, and other insects and animals. After we had already unfathomed the mystery of the stars and reduced the heavenly constellations to minute and regular calculus.
That's all. I didn't want to go. I ain't gonna play the whole video, but I wanted y'all to hear how powerful this brother spoke. You know, and he went, and in the beginning, you know, that's what he did. He went from Jamaica into the United States on a speaking tour. So he had this gift of speaking and influencing people. But even he had a gift of taking his ideals and manifesting those great ideals in the betterment for his people. Okay, here's my sources. Sources is The Negro with the Black Hat: The Rise and the Fall of Marcus Garvey by Colin Grant. Race First: The Ideology and Organizational Struggle of Marcus Garvey in the Universal Negro Improvement Association by Tony Martin. Black Past, www.blackpast.org, AHA, Black Star Line, 1919 to 1923. Wikipedia.org, Wiki Black Cross Nurses, AtlanticStar.com, 2013. 1265, Historic Example Corporation Economic Ujumanja, which is a Kiswahili word. So those are my sources that I use in this presentation today. Hope I was able to help some people. I hope they was able to learn some things. I just wanted to do something on Marcus Garvey. Marcus Garvey, actually, the brother, if I don't know if you still on here, Travis, but Yashua Ashe is one of the brothers that's over the UNIA branch that's in Shreveport, Louisiana. And just looking and seeing how that brother moving and what he's doing, he's actually taking and learned from Marcus Garvey, which Marcus Garvey also had the Marcus Garvey School of Philosophy, where they taught about the UNIA movement. So he's taken those great ideals and manifested them into reality, doing things to help the community out. So this brother has this is his second bookstore. You know, he has clothes, he has books in the bookstore. He does different hosting events. He's giving things away back in the community. It's for free. He's I seen him raising money, you know what I'm saying, for the hurricane victims that was in Texas, and the victims that was over there. I think it was I forgot the other place that the hurricane hit. So this brother is doing his part. So it expired. Man, I already knew about Marcus Garvey, but it was always basic information. So I just wanted to go a little bit farther with the information, so somebody can, you know, give a whole backdrop of Marcus Garvey on his upbringing, from what he did from the upbringing from a teenager to his different travels all over the world, what sparked his ideology of being black first, you know what I'm saying, depending on our own and not depending on nobody else, creating our own jobs, owning our own things. So I wanted to give y'all that, you know, what sparked him to do that. And that was, you know, him going and traveling to other different places. You know, before he even got to the United States, he had already traveled all the way around the world. He had went from England, France, Spain, Ireland, Hungary, Portuguese, Africa. He had went everywhere. You know, from him going all over the places, he's seen the plights of black people all over the world. And he just seen how black folks was at the bottom of the barrel. So he created so many great things. And again, this organization of Marcus Garvey, the UNIA, is one of the biggest organizations that I have ever seen. Again, UNIA movement had 6 million members. I don't know no organization to this day that had 600 members. So I hope my PowerPoint presentation was very informative. And now if you don't know who Marcus Garvey is, now you know who Marcus Garvey is. If you don't know what is the UNIA and the ACL movement, now you know about the UNIA and the ACL movement and what Marcus Garvey and the UNIA ACL movement done. So on that note, I want to say Shimon Hotep, which means go in peace. And thank you all for watching and tuning in.